One of the biggest boons to the EV industry as a whole has been the litany of incentives available for them all across the world in recent years. For several years now in the US, we have had the $7,500 EV tax credit available for select vehicles from many different brands. These cars had to meet certain material sourcing and production requirements that were designed to bring EV production to the United States long term. There has been a lot of debate over these tax credits since the beginning, but it's pretty obvious that the tax credit did a lot to make electric vehicles more attainable to the average customer. If you've been following the news lately, I'm sure you've heard about the big beautiful bill that has just passed in the US, which deals with a lot of topics, but relevant to us today is the disappearance of the federal EV tax credit. This is going to have a big impact on the EV industry, so today we're going to discuss its rollback, the reaction from the EV industry as a whole, and the deals that you may need to take advantage of soon. So with all of that in mind, let's get into it. As I mentioned a moment ago, the federal EV tax credit is one factor that has had perhaps the biggest impact on the early adoption of fully electric cars here in the United States. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of it going away, let's talk about what it actually is. An initial version of this tax credit was created all the way back in 2009, which offered up to $7,500 for any plug-in electric vehicle or hybrid. The exact amount varied based on the size of the battery pack, so effectively only fully electric vehicles could get the full tax credit. Additionally, this first version of the credit phased out for every automaker once they sold 200,000 eligible vehicles. This was essentially designed to act as a kickstart for these automakers to get their electric production going, and then to let the ball roll on its own from there. In 2018, Tesla reached that 200,000 vehicle threshold, and then GM followed suit in 2019, meaning that these two automakers started to see their tax credit eligibility be phased out. Then a couple years later, in 2022, the federal government passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which invested a lot of money into things like renewable energy and promoting the continued rollout of fully electric vehicles. This bill removed that 200,000 vehicle cap and instead implemented a set of requirements meant to bring production of these cars back to the United States. The tax credit was broken up into two $3,750 credits that were applied if the car met requirements on battery material sourcing and final production. Those sourcing requirements started out more lax, but were designed to become increasingly strict so that automakers were encouraged to move production, but still given time to implement those changes in a more realistic manner. Additionally, there was a $4,000 tax credit available for used EVs sold by certified dealers on vehicles under $25,000. One of the other big changes that came with the EV tax credit was shifting it from a deduction that you made at the end of the year on your taxes to being a point-of-sale rebate. The previous iteration was good for a lot of people, but you still had to pay the full price of the vehicle, and then you could deduct it at the end of the year, and that would only apply if you owed more than $7,500. Under this new method, you could transfer the tax credit to the dealership directly and get that discount immediately. This effectively lowered the cost of purchasing an eligible EV by $7,500 right out of the gate. This was a huge incentive that made purchasing an EV increasingly attainable to many Americans, especially when paired with additional local incentives. On top of that, it was that much less that you had to finance at the time if you were financing your vehicle. Even still, this tax credit was controversial to a lot of people, and some lawmakers have had it in their sights for years now. Some viewed it as an interference in the free market and believed that if electric cars were to take off, then they needed to do so on their own terms and of their own merit. Earlier this year, when the new president took office, Republicans made it clear that the tax credit was going to be on the chopping block. Now, with the passing of this new bill, this tax credit is officially coming to an end in just a few short months. Per the details of this bill, customers have until September 30th to take advantage of the $7,500 tax credit or the $4,000 used vehicle credit. Already, the passing of this bill seems like it's poised to have a huge impact on the auto industry as a whole, and experts on both sides have a lot to say about it. Some think that this is going to have a huge negative impact on the EV industry and will greatly slow down their adoption in the US. A study by Harvard University found that removing the tax credit could slow EV adoption by as much as 6%. Inside the industry, the removal of this tax credit has drawn a lot of different reactions, and everyone anticipates a different outcome. As it stands right now, Tesla is by far the largest EV maker in the United States, and also one of the companies that has benefited the most from this tax credit over the years. Even still, Elon Musk was actually quite vocally opposed to these tax credits for a long time. Elon's position was that the federal government should end subsidies of all sorts for electric vehicles, with the caveat that they also should stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industries as well. He and a lot of other people believe that EVs, especially those made by Tesla, are already competitive enough and no longer need those tax credits to stay afloat. Without those fossil fuel subsidies, he thinks that EVs have enough pros to easily outcompete traditional ICE vehicles. Additionally, Tesla is one of the only American EV makers that turns a profit on each of their electric vehicles sold, and they don't require that tax credit to do it. By comparison, most other automakers still lose money on each EV that they sell, and that's before they may be forced to lower prices here to make up the difference for this tax credit that's going away. Compared to other brands, Tesla has more wiggle room in their pricing, and they still believe that they have enough consumer demand that they can even thrive without tax credits at all, like they did from 2019 to 2022. Elon believes that getting rid of subsidies across the board would truly level the playing field, and that Tesla would come out on top if that were the case. While that could be the case, some experts believe that cutting the tax credit could force many legacy automakers out of the market and reduce demand for EVs overall, so it's a complicated issue for sure. Even though Elon had a role in the government for a while, this new bill has made some changes that have caused him to change his tune a bit. The final version of this bill removed the subsidies for EVs and renewable energy products, but didn't touch any of the subsidies offered to the fossil fuel industry. I think this comes as a shock to pretty much no one. In fact, they actually relaxed some of the emissions standards imposed on the auto industry that some think will actually make it easier to produce gas vehicles. So even though Elon initially was a proponent of ending these federal subsidies across the board, he and by extension Tesla are quite unhappy with the bill as it has panned out. The Tesla Solar account posted on X, quote, "Abruptly ending the energy tax credits would threaten America's energy independence and the reliability of our grid." Elon followed up on that saying, quote, "There is no change to the tax incentives for oil and gas, just EV/solar. Tesla's situation has definitely become a lot more precarious over the last year, as demand has fallen across the board for many brands, but also it seems in particular for Tesla, related to a lot of things, including Elon's controversies. The tax credit was a big incentive for Tesla vehicles, and we'll have to see how they can react to this new status quo." While Tesla is undoubtedly the biggest dedicated EV maker in the country, other executives and legacy automakers have all expressed concerns of their own. Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe was very critical of the bill and the impact he thinks that it will have on the US EV market. He views many of the changes in the bill as being ultimately bad for the US, and that it could lead to the country losing its competitive and technological edge heading into the future of transportation. He said, quote, "I think in 2030, we're going to have an even worse situation than we have today in terms of lack of choice and lack of competition. I say this all the time. I think the biggest challenge to get electric vehicle adoption from 8% to 20% is we need choice. Take Tesla Model 3 and Model Y. Great products, but they're not what everybody wants. Meaning it's not that there's anything bad about them. It's just not everybody wants the same form factor with the same sort of product trade-offs and decisions and brand positioning." Conversely, he does think that Rivian is well poised to be bringing their R2 platform to the market in just a few years. Rivian is certainly one of the most promising EV manufacturers in the country, and while their vehicles have bobbed in and out of tax credit eligibility, their upcoming R2 was definitely supposed to be eligible. We'll have to see how they manage this big change and if it will be as in demand as they expect. Other automakers haven't been quite as vocal about the impacts of this bill, but it will definitely impact their EV sales and demand. Ford's CEO Jim Farley has gone on the record many times talking about the importance of being competitive in the EV market, especially when compared to the cars coming out of China. Even though no Chinese-made EVs are currently sellable in the United States, their technological and manufacturing capabilities are making them more competitive all the time. He has said regarding this battle, quote, "We're in a global competition with China, and it's not just EVs. If we lose this, we do not have a future forward." Over the last few years, Ford's EV sales have been growing, but they still lose money on every EV sold. They have set lofty ambitions for their EV sales, but several times over the years, they have backed down on those goals. Although Ford's vehicles will no longer be eligible for that tax credit, the company claims they are still eligible to receive a government tax credit towards their upcoming battery factory. Based on this, it sounds like there are still some provisions in the bill which allow for subsidies on projects that bring certain kinds of manufacturing back to the United States. A move like this could do a lot to bring down EV costs in the US, but only time will tell how this truly impacts the market. So as we've discussed, the EV tax credit is currently slated to go away by September 30th of this year. While it is fully expected that the disappearance of the credit will hurt EV sales going forward, automakers are using this interim period to heavily push their existing qualified vehicles. In a widely circulated email, Ford said, quote, "In light of recent developments regarding the elimination of electric vehicle tax credits, Ford is saying now is the time to buy electric vehicles." Tesla has been sending out emails to potential customers saying order soon to get your $7,500. You can get $7,500 off a qualifying Tesla vehicle at delivery with the federal tax credit, which will now expire on September 30th, 2025. Must take delivery of a qualifying Tesla vehicle on or before September 30th, 2025 to be eligible. Then tons of automakers are promoting big deals right now in order to get one last big sales push before the inevitable slump that should come after this credit disappears. Before we get into individual deals, let's take a second to talk about one new deal that is temporarily available because of this new bill. In the bill, the federal government now offers, quote, "an annual tax credit of up to $10,000 on the interest of loans for new vehicles, as long as they're less than 14,000 pounds and assembled in the United States. It covers purchases made in 2025 through 2028. Since interest rates have been so high lately, this allows you to write off a great deal of the interest accrued over the course of your loan. This provision retroactively applies to any vehicle purchases made since the beginning of this year, so any already accumulated interest is deductible. Since that incentive started immediately, this also means that for the next few months, customers can take advantage of the old and new incentives simultaneously. USA Today has put together an example showing how much money you can save by using both of these deals. They use a hypothetical example of someone purchasing a brand new EV at the national average price of $57,734. By deducting that $7,500, that brings our adjusted price to $50,234. Assuming you were then to pay a typical down payment of around $5,234, that would bring the amount owed down to about $45,000, which you would then have to finance. If you were to sign up for a 36-month loan at 6.7% APR, you could stand to deduct a lot over the course of the loan. In 2025, you could deduct $1,412. In 2026, you could deduct $2,114. In 2027, $1,114. And then in 2028, the last year of the loan, you could deduct an extra $159. That means, in a sense, you're getting back some of the money that you've paid in interest over the course of the loan via your taxes at the end of the year. Assuming you were interested in getting an auto loan with those exact terms, you could save a total of $12,299. This is a good deal during this brief overlap period where both of these deals exist, but after September 30th, it will change quite considerably. To start, the terms of this new tax incentive are quite a bit more restrictive than the original tax credit. For one, this interest deal phases out for all individuals that make more than $100,000, or for couples that make more than $200,000. Additionally, this deal can't be used towards any fleet purchases, commercial vehicles, or leases. The original tax credit was eligible for anyone making less than $150,000, and for couples who made less than $300,000. Additionally, that tax credit was available for fleet vehicles, company cars, and individual vehicles. In fact, many more cars were actually eligible for the tax credit when you leased them compared to buying them outright or financing. Regardless of how you feel about this income cap drop, this will likely have a big impact on the sales of EVs overall. While the theoretical maximum amount you can deduct under this new incentive, $10,000, is more than the previous tax credit amount of $7,500, it likely won't be as helpful as the other in most circumstances. If we were to use the same figures from the previous USA Today example, but did not use the federal EV tax credit, we can see that a 3-year, $50,234 loan at 6.7% would accrue $5,357. That is over $2,000 less than the immediate savings that you would get with the current tax credit. You could theoretically save more if you were purchasing a more expensive vehicle, but given the new lower income caps, I'm not sure how likely that is. While some could debate whether the new or old vehicle incentive is better, this sundown period does mean that customers can temporarily take advantage of both of these deals at once. Like I mentioned a little bit ago, though, tons of automakers are using this period of flux to heavily promote sales of their own vehicles. First up, let's look at Tesla. On Tesla's website, they display a banner that reads $7,500 federal tax credit ending, take delivery by September 30th, 2025. Some have pointed out this seems to be in the largest font Tesla has ever had on their website. There's also, of course, that email I talked about, and then this deal applies to the Model Y, Model 3, and 2 trims of the Cybertruck. The Model S and X are excluded because they're priced out. Then Tesla is offering 0% APR for up to 60 months right now for purchases of the Cybertruck that include the full self-driving package. FSD costs $8,000, which eats up your tax credit, but you do get FSD essentially for free, and then you don't have to pay interest. Tesla has also been offering a lot of 0% APR details lately to deal with their own demand problems. This deal was in place for the Model 3 fairly recently, and it hasn't been in place for quite some time for the Model Y, although they did just end a deal for 1.99% APR on the Model Y. That was to drive sales for the previous quarter, but it seems that soon enough we'll probably see these deals return, in tandem with the tax credit going away. Over at Ford, they offer 2 electric vehicles right now in the US, the F-150 Lightning and Mustang Mach-E. The $7,500 tax credit is only available right now for select trims of the F-150, and they're also offering 0% financing for 72 months, plus $1,500 cash back on 2024 F-150s. They're also extending their, quote, Power Promise promotion until September 30th, and this is a promo that includes a free home charger and installation with purchase of one of their electric vehicles. Now, of course, these deals do have certain credit limits and they're not available everywhere, so we're also seeing reports of Ford having their 000 summer promo, and this launched on July 8th across most Ford and Lincoln models. It's a 0% down payment, then 0% APR financing for 48 months, and no payment for the first 90 days. Over at GM, they actually have a lot of different EV options. So first, we have Chevy. Chevy offers a 0% APR for 60 months on the 2025 Equinox EV, Blazer EV, or Silverado EV. All 3 of those vehicles are eligible for the tax credit. On top of that, Costco members can get an additional $1,250 toward the purchase or lease of any of these vehicles from Chevy. Over at Cadillac, GM is also offering the same Costco deal for customers who purchase or lease a Cadillac Escalade IQ, Optic, or Vistique. All 3 of those cars can be eligible for the $7,500 tax credit as well. At GMC, the GMC Sierra EV is eligible for the tax credit for certain configurations, and then they are offering 2.9% APR for 72 months for well-qualified buyers. Now over at Rivian, their cars are eligible for the $7,500 vehicle tax credit, but only on leases, not on purchases. So they're offering a $0 down payment on all leases of tri-motor variants for the R1S and R1T. They're also offering $1,500 discounts on the dual motor configuration with the large or max battery pack and the performance upgrade. So those are all cars that qualify for the tax credit and have promotions going on right now that you can stack together. On top of this, however, there are a bunch of cars that may or may not qualify for the tax credit depending on the car's eligibility, the trim's eligibility, and your own eligibility, but they do have offers for 0% APR financing right now that you might want to take advantage of. Over at Acura, the 2024 ZDX has 0% financing for 72 months. We already talked about those vehicles from Chevy, but the Chevy Silverado also has 0% available for 60 months. The Chevrolet BrightDrop van for 2025 has 0% for up to 84 months, plus up to $31,500 cash back. That's a pretty incredible deal for this van, and it's of course a very specific use case, but I have seen cases where people can get this van at a very reasonable price. It could be a cool project for some people, or just makes sense for people's businesses. The Dodge Charger Daytona EV has 0% financing available for 72 months, and then the GMC Hummer EV also has 0% available for 60 months. The Sierra EV has 0% for 36 months, and then over at Nissan, the Ariya has 0% financing for 72 months, along with the Nissan Leaf. The Subaru Solterra has 0% financing for 72 months, and then over at Tesla, we talked about the Cybertruck, but we do suspect that these deals may return for the Model 3 and Y. I would not be surprised at all if by the end of July we see 0% financing become available for the Model 3 and Y. Maybe it will have a stipulation that you have to upgrade full self-driving in order to get this, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the quarter this 0% deal becomes available for Tesla's vehicles with no caveats. That's definitely no guarantee, but it seems very likely at this point. For the Toyota BZ4X, they have 0% financing available for 60 months, and then for the Volkswagen ID4, they also have 0% available for 72 months or $5,000 cash back as an option. As always, these deals vary by region and credit approval does apply, but it could be something that you can absolutely take advantage of and save a lot of money with. It's definitely worth checking with your local dealers if you're buying a car that is not a Tesla, versus Tesla will have their deals nationally listed on their website, and that doesn't change depending on your particular area. So far, we've mainly been talking about cars that are already on the market that will be losing this EV tax credit. And one thing has been clear, especially in the United States, that we're still waiting on truly affordable EVs to come to market. If you want to get a reasonable electric vehicle today that's able to charge quickly, from most brands, that's going to start upwards of $40,000. The cheapest we see in the US really is the $35,000 Chevy Equinox, and a lot of companies have been fairly reticent to actually work on affordable EVs and bring them to market. As we talked about earlier, a ton of these brands still lose money on every EV that they sell, so to make a cheaper one and to spend all the research and development that it takes to actually make that car, it's a big ask for them, especially when they're still profiting on their gas vehicles. In fact, for most of these companies, their gas vehicles are funding their EV ventures. That's what makes Tesla and Rivian and others like them quite different, because they only make electric vehicles, so when they turn a profit, it's on those electric vehicles. In any case, over in China, there are plenty of affordable EV options, and we've been waiting for those to come to market in the United States for years now, and tons of companies have made promises, and it seems like we may finally get there, but then the EV tax credit may be affecting things even further. Let's say a company was planning that they can bring an affordable EV to market that will be about $30,000 out the gate, but the customer can buy that at $22,500. Well, now the company is going to have to try to price that lower and maybe split the difference a little bit or go all the way down to that price that they hoped customers could actually obtain it for. But the first car that will definitely be affected here is one you've probably seen and heard about, the Tesla Robotaxi. Now, this is a car that was a ways off in Tesla's plans. Even Elon Musk's timeline, which he himself admitted was ambitious, was that this car would come sometime before 2027. They're planning for high volume here, but then they priced it at under $30,000 with incentives. That was a weird thing for them to announce at the time at this We Robot event, because most of us knew it was just around the corner that this tax credit was probably going away from the administration he actually helped to bring into office. So why would he be quoting a price with incentives? I guess at the time it was still in place and it seemed like maybe it wouldn't be going away. But now that $30,000 price tag has become about $37,500. Today, the cheapest car you can get in the US from Tesla is $42,490, the Tesla Model 3. So this car, the Robotaxi, will only come in at about $5,000 cheaper for a car with only 2 seats that's much smaller. Yes, it's fully autonomous, but won't the Model 3 also be fully autonomous? I guess maybe that $37,500 price tag has to include FSD, because if the Robotaxi didn't include FSD by default, it literally couldn't drive. So maybe you're looking at more of a steep difference there, because the price tag today for FSD is $8,000. So ultimately, that could make this car about $13,000 cheaper than buying a Model 3 optioned with Tesla's full self-driving package. But still, since the tax credit is still around right now for the Model 3, this price drop for the Robotaxi, even with FSD factored in, might only save about $5,500 if pricing stays the same going throughout the disappearance of this tax credit. Tesla has been talking about the $35,000 Model 3 for a long time now, and for a little time they did actually ship a $35,000 version of that car, but it quickly disappeared. We've seen ones in the upper $30,000s, like $38,000 at times, that were standard range cars, but now we're back up over $40,000 with long range cars. Again, things may change here with the disappearance of this tax credit because Tesla could actually make EVs with LFP battery packs, potentially, more easily. But the Robotaxi still seems like it's going to come in a little more expensive than expected. Maybe that's okay because it can drive you everywhere, but it's not as much going to help us because of the disappearance of this tax credit. Now, another company that has been announced recently is Slate Auto. A lot of people got excited about this because they are specifically targeting a low price point. Slate Auto has an upcoming highly modular and customizable EV truck, and this is backed by Jeff Bezos. Originally, this car was slated to come in for less than $20,000, which was a very big deal. But again, that was with the tax credit. So when this bill was passed, Slate removed mention of that price tag from their website, and it's now listed at a starting price in the mid-20s. That's still a very good price for an EV, but definitely takes the wind out of their sales pitch just a little bit as a $20,000 vehicle. Over at Jeep, a while ago, they talked about a $25,000 Renegade EV. A lot of people speculated that this vehicle would only get that price with the tax credit, and of course, Jeep hasn't confirmed that, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Will they actually find a way to sell it at $25,000, or are we looking at a price tag closer to $32,000? I think that seems extremely likely, since Jeep definitely doesn't have a car anywhere close to this right now. Now, in the near future here, we should hopefully see a relaunched version of the Chevy Bolt. The Chevy Bolt actually became quite a popular EV because it offered a decent range and decent specs for a reasonable price tag. But Chevy discontinued the Chevy Bolt because they were still losing money on it, and now they're updating it with their latest platform. That's expected to come sometime soon, although we have no word on price yet. But again, was GM betting on having access to that tax credit when bringing this Chevy Bolt to market? They already have the $35,000 Equinox, so we were expecting that the Chevy Bolt might be able to start under that, but maybe they were hoping with the tax credit it could be even lower and make up some of the difference of their own production costs. Over at Honda, they just recently announced that they are scrapping plans for their large EV that's also an SUV. According to Nikkei Asia, Honda has halted development of a planned large electric SUV aimed for around 2027 as a launch in the US. They say that this is due to declining demand for EVs there, but then also a key factor is the rollback of the EV tax credit. They expect that this will specifically dampen consumer interest, and so bringing a large electric SUV to market here won't make sense for them. Instead, they're cutting their electrification investment from around $69 billion to $48 billion through 2030, redirecting those funds towards profitable hybrid models. They plan to launch 13 new hybrids between 2027 and 2030, targeting 2.2 million hybrids by 2030. Again, this all seems to go along with the fact that this could just face delays because Honda still does plan for electrification by 2040. They're still planning to launch their O Series EVs with the prototypes that they unveiled, and those are still slated for production sometime in 2026. Then, despite this short-term scaling back, they reaffirmed their goal of achieving 100% electric or fuel cell new vehicle sales by 2040. Over at Ford, they've been planning on a more affordable option somewhere in the ballpark of this $25,000 price tag. Their, quote, skunkworks team has been working on this project for a while now, and it could be coming as soon as next year. That's another vehicle, though, that's unclear if that price tag was based on tax credits. But at this point, it seems pretty likely. It seems like a lot of automakers were looking at that tax credit availability and saying, okay, well, we can make a vehicle that we can then list at this price because of that tax credit. Now, it's no longer possible. A $20,000 to $25,000 EV has really been the holy grail for a lot of automakers in the US for quite some time now. A lot of people have been specifically aiming for this price target because if they can achieve it, it's where real growth can happen in this market. EV sales have only grown to a certain point, and that's because you're asking people to typically spend a decent amount more to get into one of these vehicles. The used market for EVs has been growing and giving people more options, but ultimately we want to get to a situation where a lot of people can buy a new EV at a reasonable price, and then those used EVs are even cheaper as a result, because they started out cheaper new. So the disappearance of this tax credit raises a lot of questions as to, will automakers be able to achieve that in the US? Will that price tag actually be possible, or just cause these automakers to lose even more money? A $32,000 vehicle without the tax credit is definitely not bad at all compared to a lot of other electric options right now, but it's still a big jump in price over the lowest cost gas cars. Ultimately, in my view, though, the technology is there, and it's going to keep developing, and it's going to get there. It's just a matter of time, and this EV tax credit was something that allowed automakers to push this technology a little bit faster. They didn't have to entirely figure out how they're going to save $7,500 more per car. They were able to take advantage of this for the meantime to drive EV adoption and drive their own research and development. Now, kind of as Rivian's CEO RJ Scaringe was hinting, it seems like we might not actually have as many options in 5 years. But beyond that, we should see options continue to grow as more and more companies actually figure out how to do this. The very interesting piece of this, though, is that over at Tesla, they were kind of poised to be the company that would solve this, but they're more focused on autonomy and the Robotaxi. For some, that's a big distraction, but if they actually achieve it, it might shift this whole question entirely, because if they can truly ship a self-driving EV at a cost even a little bit elevated from a normal low-cost EV, it seems like something people are going to want, because it brings back a lot of time into their day. On top of that, you may not even need to buy a car because robotaxis will be readily available and cheaper to use all of the time, as opposed to owning your own vehicle, paying for insurance, and paying for everything that is included with that. Either way, a lot remains to be seen in this space, and the EV market is always in flux, it seems. There are new EVs being announced every day, it seems, from automakers, talking about new features that will be amazing when they come to market, and then some of these change a lot before they get released, some of them never actually come to be, some of them are now going to be $7,500 more expensive, and then some of them may just get canceled altogether in favor of a robotaxi project. But what are your thoughts on the disappearance of this tax credit? Do you think it's something that is going to kill the EV market or something that will just delay things for a few years here? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. In the meantime, if you want to see the latest Tesla news, you can check out that video linked up here or in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.